recording. And everybody should see an agenda here, and we'll let Ken kick us off with a little bit about why we're here and who we all are.
Okay, thank you folks for joining us. As you are probably aware, this webinar is being sponsored by Faith Communities Go Green, which is a kind of a collaboration between Green Umbrella, which is a Cincinnati area environmental group, and Equation, which is a Cincinnati area religious conglomeration. And so together we've broken out an organization called Faith Communities Go Green, which is aimed at helping religious communities of all types to create a more sustainable and equitable future by working together to reduce the risk of catastrophic climate change. And you know, one of the little, maybe feels like baby steps, but important steps in doing that is understanding our energy use, the first step in trying to reduce it. And so when Justin kindly offered to lead a session on how to use Portfolio Manager, I jumped on it. And Justin is the Director of Opportunity Development at Energility, which is an energy management company in Columbus. And he is a certified energy manager with over 20 years of experience. And his company, Energility, provides energy audits, energy project design and management, and advises on financing projects. So I thank them for taking this on and turn it over to Justin to run the program.
Thank you, Ken. So appreciate everybody joining us. As Ken said, representing Energility, I actually have a couple of my colleagues, Zach Hadley and my partner, Molly Yeager, on the call here this evening. They've both done some work in the portfolio manager space, helping with data and analytics and working with our clients. And our company Energility is born out of the energy efficiency and sustainability work that we do. So just gonna, you know, since we have again a small group, we'll make this a little maybe a little less formal. But you know, one of the things that we've talked about with getting started is about benchmarking and use of Portfolio Manager. Anybody want to offer any insights on their knowledge related to benchmarking, or have you used Portfolio Manager before?
Well, I have had some experience with it. About 10 or 12 years ago, I at a church in Virginia signed them up on Portfolio Manager and managed to learn how to do it, the version that they had back then. It's been a while since I've been back into it. But one of my experiences was, I guess, was when I first came back to Cincinnati in 2016, and we ended up getting a church that I was with at the time certified as a Energy Star congregation, which is quite surprising because it was an older church, but the star is kind of aligned right, and Energility helps us out in doing the assessment that was required. So yeah, I've had a little experience, but it's been a while.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Ed Lynn in Ann Arbor. I've had experience benchmarking, but that's all with the auto industry. Nothing with here, and I'm just interested to see how this all would work, because we have somewhat of a complicated setup right now.
Okay.
Very complicated setup, and so I'm hoping not too complicated, more complicated than this system can handle.
Okay, great. We'll see, and you know, if at least by the end of this, Ed, if we have some complications, we'll that'll be some of my homework to dig into for next week when we talk about more detailed ways to use Portfolio Manager.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
I'm Steve Slaughter from First Baptist in Springfield. I have no experience with Portfolio Manager. I know what it is. I've kind of glanced at it, but I haven't really delved into it.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, a couple of the reasons that you benchmark is to establish kind of a line in the sand, a place to start, a reference point. You know, anything related to, most everybody wants to talk about the cost, but certainly energy performance, environmental performance, managing energy data. In some cases, we've worked with congregations that have had one line item in their budget, and it's called utilities. So they don't know what's water, what's gas, what's electric, et cetera. So this is a place that you can go. It's online. It uses some standard data sets to compare to. So when you're trying to compare how are we performing, some people are of the school of thought that, hey, we're always comparing against ourselves, which is one way. And this tool allows you to not only do that, but then also compare against other houses of worship of similar characteristic and similar climate zone. So you're not going to compare yourself if you're in Ann Arbor, Ed, you're going to be compared to others in similar climate zone, not a church in, say, Miami. But it's an online tool and it's free. So most people say, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. No, but there is free access here to the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So one of the things I want to just share a couple of quick tidbits on Energility. So we have been an Energy Star partner for a while now, and we're also listed as an Energy Star service provider. And we've benchmarked, I think our latest stats are over 340 different buildings using this tool. And most recently, this number 6 is a little misleading because we've had 6 buildings rated as Energy Star, being labeled as Energy Star certified. We have one client who actually submits them themselves. So we did 17 here in the last year. Another thing that we have been able to do quite a bit of help in, provide a little bit of help in the house of worship space is there are only 5, and Ken alluded to this a minute ago. He's one of 5. There's only 5 houses of worship in the state of Ohio that are listed as Energy Star certified, and we've had the privilege to be the certifying engineer on all 5 of those properties. And so then I want to step into some of the Energy Star details here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Let's go dig into a little bit of the substance of what is Portfolio Manager and some of those details. So let's shift gears here. There we go. We should see understanding Portfolio Manager's metrics. This is really kind of the substance of Portfolio Manager. Portfolio Manager, again, allows you to be able to assemble a property with multiple data points, and that goes across a number of different
Justin, can I interrupt a second? Joanne Person is waiting to get in. Can she be let in by somebody?
Let's see.
Or is she in the wrong room?
I'm just a second here.
Okay.
I don't show anybody else waiting.
Well, who knows where she is then? Okay, let me.
Hey, Justin.
Yep,
As for Have her log back out and then log back in. Sometimes that can uncross the wires. My tech support's telling me that they resent her the link to that, so.
Yeah, she pops into himself.
Give her a second to hop on board here. Oh, there we go. Hi, Joanne.
Ah, yay.
I got you.
I'm gonna
Great.
turn the phone off and get him feedback. Yeah, thank you.
All right,
Sorry about that. I don't know why I
that's all
put
right.
it in.
We're just transitioning to talk a little bit about some of the details of Portfolio Manager.
Okay.
So with the tool, it's kind of a one size fits most. Pretty much any building type you can use this tool for, and specifically around houses of worship. It's one of the categories. You can see there's a breakdown of all different types of primary categories, of which then religious worship and worship facilities are classified. And you'll see description here. One of the things that Energy Star does really well is there are lots of places within the tool, as long as you're online, that you can link back to and find reference, a glossary to determine, gosh, this is what I consider a worship facility. What do they consider a worship facility? You'll also notice on the worksheet that was shared with you previously that we have some of this information pulled together so that if you happen to be doing this with pen and paper or maybe on a tablet that's not on Wi-Fi, you can utilize that as a reference. But for in this particular case, worship facility is representative of all types of faiths or meeting houses, and it includes not only the worship area, but the food preparation areas, the community rooms, classrooms, storage areas, all space within the facility that's classified as the worship area. And they also do provide a range that if it's got less than 25 seats or if it's got greater than 4,000, then there may be a different classification for it. So the tool is really good for benchmarking. Again, one of the ways you're benchmarking is, hey, this is our point in time. We'll call it April 2023. How are we performing going forward? Another way to benchmark is how do you compare to other houses of worship on a 1 to 100 scale? Pretty easy to understand. If you're close to 100, you're doing really well. If you're down in the southern half of the scale, yeah, got some room for improvement. But this statistical database uses actual data from real buildings around the country, and it's surveyed every 5 to 7 years, and they go through and do a lot of data scrutiny to be able to assess different characteristics within a building. And I'm not going to read all this to you, and it's certainly available as a reference, but the tool uses a scoring mechanism that helps normalize for things related to weather and building types. So when your house of worship is getting scored, you're being scored against other houses of worship. The other thing to keep in mind is there's two big pieces of data. One's called source data and one's called site data. Site data is exactly what you think. It's the on-site, the energy used at your facility. The source data would be, where's it coming from? Is your building all electric and you're getting it off the electric grid? Do you have some electric and gas and you're getting it from a gas pipeline? Are you connected to the grid in Southwest Ohio, Central Ohio, Michigan? Because those environmental impacts are different depending on what type of equipment you have in your facility and what type of connection you have to the greater energy networks.
Just in question right there.
Mhm.
Does this
Okay.
allow you, right now, our building is serviced by electric, DTE, gas, windmill that's out front generating electricity, and 112 solar power panels.
Mhm.
And we're going to add on another 200 solar panels up on the roof. Does that allow for different mixes coming into the system here?
Sure does. And I tell you what, Ed, I made a note of that, and when we get into the details of the property, we'll actually make sure we touch on the different utility types.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So the 1 to 100 score is useful, but we have to have the data for your building. So we want to define property type, some of the details, and then, you know, the other key piece of it is the data. We'll come back to that here in a second and break that down. The last couple of things just to point out about Portfolio Manager is the Energy Star program was started by the EPA. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that there's a focus on the environmental impact. So again, you know, there's a good reference here about difference between site and source energy, but ultimately your score is coming back to, you know, how is your environmental impact improving or decreasing as you move over time? Your point, Ed, about having different types of energy use is well taken, because as you're generating more of your energy on site, your impact at the source or at the electric grid is not as prevalent. So therefore that's weighted more, you'll get a higher score, even if you're consuming the same amount of energy in the building, because you're going to be generating it on site as opposed to pulling it off the electric grid.
And do they adjust, for example, let's say DTE is basically coal driven, and let's say there's another utility in the country that's basically solar driven. Do they distinguish between those, or do they just have commercial electric as the same everywhere? Since they were started as an environmental scoring.
Yep, that's a good question. I made sure to note that because I'm going to point that out in the tool, exactly where that resides and how you can see that detail. Okay. And I'll be clear too, again, this is a small group, so as you have questions that come up, we'll make sure we get those all addressed. So I'm going to go back.
In Ohio, consider us this part of PJM, and we all lumped into that, or do they break it down by utility?
Yeah, so they actually do break it down by utility.
Okay.
Last thing I wanted to point out as some background before we start diving into some of these details is that Energy Star, again, is a fairly robust site. And one of the things that they do have, you'll see here over the course of the next 30 days, they repeat some of these courses multiple times, but there is a number of different online courses that you can go kind of on demand and either schedule to go and see the webinar or go and reference later some demo and how-to videos. So Energility is always welcoming questions. We serve everyone from small business and nonprofits to large commercial folks. So we'll always take your call, but certainly that's a way to some folks are DIY and like to do it yourself. So, right. So,
Hey, Justin, while you're on that, do you think it would be valuable to the people who missed this first session to go sign up for one of those comparable sessions that offered by G-Star?
yeah, Portfolio 101, 102, or I'm sorry, 101, 201, 301, kind of all dig into the same escalation that we're looking at doing here tonight and next week, is getting into, how do you get set up? How do you start using the tool? And what are some of the different nuances that you can see? So at this point, so great questions, Ed, on some of those details. Any other questions before we dig into the portfolio manager account?
Yeah, you said that they specifically address houses of worship. But when I was on and when I was watching your scrolling, I didn't see something specific for houses of worship because it would be so different.
Sure, let's go back here. Is that, let's see, under eligibility criteria or property types?
So they have all different hot property types in there.
Yeah, so let's see.
And one of the categories is congregations
Oh, okay.
or houses of worship.
Yeah, right here. So they have here just a list of categories. And then here they, some of the categories like banking, there's different types of, or education, there's different types of education facilities. So like religious worship is in a classification by itself.
Religious worship, okay.
Yeah. And then it points back to the definition so that you can clarify that it is a worship facility. For example, medical office is a classification, subclassification of office, and there's some nuance because you could have a building that's got MRI machines, but you could also have the same medical office building and it's got mental health practitioners that are doing counseling and have lights and lamps as opposed to large equipment. So the glossary is really helpful to be able to help make sure you understand the nuances between the terminology that they're utilizing. Is that helpful, Joanne?
Yes.
Okay. So what we wanted to do is just look here now at a little bit of the anatomy of a portfolio manager account. I've got one here called demo because some of you, while you may be in charge of just one congregation, maybe you have a small group or an organization that has a number of facilities, you can share all those together in one account. So once you've actually created an account, and I'm going to, for purpose of walking us through here, when you actually come to this site, you can actually go here and create a new account. And it's as simple as most sites where you're just simply putting in a username and password and a little bit of information about yourself and whether your organization is someone who's doing business in one of these particular areas. But we're going to assume at this point you have an account and you get logged on and you're starting to add a property. What are some of the things that you're going to need to see? Again, we shared a worksheet with you that has all the data that you would need to set up a house of worship in a portfolio manager. So for right now, we've got a couple of folks in our demo account here, and not going to do too much meddling because these are all 4 actual live facilities for clients that we work with. But let's look at the property level. We need to know some information about the property, like what is the site's address? What is the site's address? Where is it located? And that becomes when we're talking, both Ken and Ed were asking about the different utility connections. Once you've already entered the data in the database format, one of the things that you can see here is there's several tabs across here, and one of those is these details that you would be entering in about the building. But then you can also start getting into, let's see, and let's go through the data part first. When we look at the
Before you
area
do
of the building.
the ID number, that's assigned by the software?
Yep. A lot of this information, once you go through and populate it in the initial setup, and I'm going to walk through creating one from scratch here in a minute, and we're going to see something like this as the result of that. So you're going to have data that you're going to put in that says, hey, this is how big the church is. This is how many hours it operates. Again, if you're online, you might just be able to come over here and hover over and say, oh, well, that's how many hours the church is operating in a week, or how many hours the synagogue's operating in a week. Hey, what's the floor area? But we've given you some tips and tidbits on the worksheet that we'll go through. But it's one of those things that it seems pretty simple, right? How big's the church, or how big's the building? Well, you can sometimes have a debate amongst folks and saying, gosh, we have one set of building plans that says it's 14,000 square feet. The county auditor says it's 15,000 square feet. Well, who's right? Well, ultimately you can go down and simply measure the building. But one thing I want to point out is this data is important to have as accurate as possible. But the really the key point is that you're getting the information into the tool, because there's some things you can do to make adjustments later. So these are some of the data points that you need to get the building set up. How many hours is it operating? And that's looking at the weekly operating hours, Monday to Friday. Is the office open all 5 days? 8 hours a day? How many days? In this particular case, this building is open 4 days a week, and it's operating 47 hours over the course of the whole week. It does have cooking facilities, and they've stated there's 200 people. 200 is the head count and seating capacity of the sanctuary or the worship space. In their food preparation area is about 300 square feet out of their 13,000. And
just, can this data be updated later on? For example, your example there where you said, oh, we thought the building was 14,000 square feet, and then because that's what the plan said, and then you go measure it a year later and find out it's 14.5 or 15. You can just update all this stuff and everything will flow through.
Yep. Really great question, and this is the perfect screen for answering that. So one of the things that will happen when you're populating the data is, and you'll see when we go through it here in a minute, there's a checkbox. You can say, gosh, I really don't know. I'm just going to estimate it, or I don't know, and this is a temporary value. Once you've already again, this is once we have an established account. You can actually go in here and say, hey, in this building data, I want to correct a mistake. Or, hey, I want to make an update, because this same church could say, hey, we just built 5,000 square feet on, now we're at 18,850 square feet, and we want to make an update. But when we're calculating our energy performance, starting in April of 2023, it's going to be based on 18,000 square feet, not 13. So actually, when you go in here, when you click in that drop down, it will actually give you the ability to go in here and actually make these updates in here. And then you can make an adjustment. In this particular case, you'll see that the 1943 through 1958, it was 6,000 square feet, and then they had an addition on. Now, to be candid with you, we don't have energy data going back to 1957, 58. So it would not impact their particular score. But if you do have those transitions here going forward, or you said, hey, we have 3 years worth of energy data we want to populate into the tool, and we had an expansion a year ago, or we had an adjustment in our operating hours a year ago, you can make that change in here.
So when in October, we plan to put another 100,000 kilowatts of 100,000 watts of solar power on the roof, then I would update this and say, as of, let's say, October, or whenever DTE turns us on, this is our new solar energy, and go from
Yep.
there.
Yep,
Okay.
and we'll show you where that is, because that's actually the next tab over. So this is actually looking at the building data.
Mhm.
And again, once you get in, you know, again, once you've classified as a house of worship, you're probably not going to unclassify it that way. But this helps you understand if, as we looked at the description earlier, it accounts for all those spaces. So you don't have to break out, well, this 100 square feet is mechanical room and this is classroom, et cetera. But if you do have a larger facility, like for example, some that have a full K-12 school attached to them,
Mhm.
you may have a breakout of the worship facility versus the school. But to your point there, Ed, on the next piece of data, we got the property. You know, the next thing we need to know is meters. So the property has energy meters, either electric, gas, both, possibly solar.
Mhm.
And in that particular case, once you've added a meter, this is where it's going to show up, and you'll see all those different meters here. Now, again, this is an older church that has had an expansion, and they also have, you know, a little bit of interesting geography within the small building, but it does have them situated where when they got their expansion, they got a new gas service. And so you can see all of those meters here. And then you can also see the most recent date that the data has been updated. Now, this is also where you would have, you know, say a solar meter or your wind meter that's being able to show the getting the data from there would be different than say getting from your utility,
Mhm.
most likely because you're getting it from the software off the solar system or from the wind system. And just as a point of reference, since we're talking about that, I'm going to deviate for just a moment and go and share one of our clients that I would not have any concerns with us sharing and showing you this, because they actually have solar. And so you will see that's the way theirs is situated. So
Okay.
every month when our when we update when we go and review their building, we have to pull the data down from a software and then we plug it in here, because there are ways, and we'll go through that here in setting up a test site, is there's ways to be able to take a Excel file and upload it in, or be able to hand key that in that on a month by month basis. But that's a example of if you had more than just electric and gas and you had solar, it would show up, and so you could see your usage here in a chart as well. Go back here to our demo group. And so we got a property, we got some details about it, and we have some energy meters. Now, Portfolio Manager has been around since the early 2000s, just after turn of the century. And it's been heavily focused on environmental impact. I will tell you that we have some clients that we have water data for, and we have a number of them that do not. Energies, the EPA has also been focusing on, and we'll not dig into that tonight, but the program called Water Sense. And so they're focusing on water conservation. So you will probably see this tool publicized more and more for use for water. And certainly if you have or desire to add a water meter, you can add a water meter and water data and track that ongoing performance, but it does not impact your Energy Star score. So some of you may have noticed that, and part of the anatomy of this site is you have the details and the data across here, but then also it's got this ongoing reference point of, hey, Energy Star score, we talked about that, 1 to 100. Well, they're currently at a 51 and they started out at a 41, so they've been making some progress. And next week we'll get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts on how to utilize the tool to make some of those things happen. So when we're getting this all set up, it's gonna, and we get our data in for the building and our data in for the energy, it's gonna populate some of these tabs like the goals. It'll have a baseline defined for us, and it'll have, you know, the current, most recent period of energy, looking at score, looking at energy use intensity, EUI. That's basically, that acronym is just boiling down electric, gas, solar, every energy source into a common unit called British thermal units. And that's just how much is being used on a per square foot basis, so we can make some comparisons. Again, site versus source energy. And then Energy Star does not require you to enter cost data. And we'll show you the sheet here in just a second. But if you do provide the cost data, you can see they've actually made some performance improving from 41 to 51 on energy performance, but cost-wise, they're actually paying more now than they were during their baseline year. Probably has a reference to do with the pricing on the rates.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see the environmental impact of that. Now, I'm going to go back here for a second to the details. And there we go. So in this sheet, this was the energy tab, and we have the meters here. So if we had to add a new meter, or we can see that we have our ones that we thought we had. There's a couple nuggets of information here with setting up a portfolio manager account. There's 5 different ways that you can get data in. The 2 easiest ones are get a hold of the utility to have them dump it in there for you. May or may not happen. You can hire someone like us to put it in there for you, or automatically connect it. Or there's a couple of spreadsheets that you can download. So click on that. Oh, that's not what I wanted.
I'm laughing about you have the utility. If they offer it, they'll put it in. DTE, they've got lots of problems. The last billing I've gotten from them was from our usage as of January 12th.
Oh boy.
Ouch.
So even if they're putting it in for you for free, you're not getting real time information.
I don't have any readings, and then all of a sudden we just get a WAPO bill, and then we pay it, and then they go silent again. They're horrible. Okay.
Yep. So there's a couple different ways we can get the data in there. So as you get the account set up, you know, you can hand key it in, or you can update with a spreadsheet, and we'll go through that here when we set up a test account. So the one thing I wanted to point out since we're here is Ed's question about, and Ken's question about, hey, do we just get lumped into the PJM grid? Again, that's basically everywhere from Indiana all the way over to the East Coast and just south of New York all the way down to Kentucky. But this actually shows your electric distribution utility and then the greater part of the grid. So Ed's connection up in Michigan would be obviously different with Detroit, Toledo, Edison, and then also the upper part of the PJM grid, and his weather station would be different. So this is how it looks at determining what your locations are. And again, because they're highlighted there with links, you can actually go in and get reference points. So electric emissions rate. There we go. So then this tells you right here, the electric emission, the emissions factor, this will tell you right here how that is calculated. And again, for some of you, you want to know, hey, it's pulling relevant, accurate regional data for me. Others may want to dig into the technical reference on greenhouse gas emissions. We actually had a physicist in one of our clients' boards that actually, he dug into our report fantastically and scrutinized every little bit of it. But I know that some folks want to know hey, it's really happening, and some folks want to peek under the hood and tinker a little bit. So
just one question on that. Is there any, is there backup there that's available that just shows major power producers in the country and what their score is on emissions? That does compare, just like, okay, where does DTE stand nationally? I would imagine, since I think it's 60 or 70% burning coal pretty horribly, but just backup on that instinctive
I
feeling.
think there is, isn't there?
yeah, and I was going to say, I
think
made it.
Putting out data like that. I remember seeing recently they talked about it on something that was sent to me. I don't know whether it's down to the utility level or just down to this regional, sub-regional value there, but there is some information about, local cleanliness or lack thereof of the different utilities.
Okay.
If I can find it, Ed, I'll send you a link to it.
And I was going to say, I made a note of that too. So if once we go through and do kind of a setup of portfolio manager account and then go through the worksheet, we'll come back to that if there's some questions around that. All right. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead here for just a second and pretend that I'm just setting up my house of worship and just kind of walk through this so that we can just see what some of those pain points are. Pardon me?
How did you get to this page?
So at this point, we would just assume I was able to log in and it's adding a property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so we're gonna start out with, you can kind of think about this when you're flying the airplane into town. You're at the very highest level. You can pick out the schools and the houses of worship and office buildings, but now we got to get some details here. So my property is either part of something bigger and part of a campus, and that's maybe a whole nother webinar in and of itself, is going over the campus setup. But we're going to say it's one building and it's part of an existing property, or we're just going to say it's a test property for right now. But we're going to pretend like it's. So my friend Zach is here. So this is Zach's house of worship. And it's in the United States. And it happens to be at, we'll say 4400 North. That happens to be our office address. So we're going to say that it was built 1973. And
Justin, how about we got about 3,600 square feet, 36,000 square feet. Half were built one time and half the other. So for the year built there, do you start with the first one or the second one or both of them, or?
yeah, that's a really great question. So what I would suggest doing here would be, this is where we would utilize that reference point of, let's put the data in from the oldest. What was your square footage of your first one?
1,800. Okay, so you put the 1800, yeah,
So we'd say we're gonna put that one in first, and then once we go through and set up the account, do you irrigate it? We use you as a test here, Ed. Do you irrigate any grass?
no,
Okay. And
we got
this
40
is,
acres.
yeah, that'd be a lot of water.
Yep.
So this is a question that comes up from time to time. So with occupancy, some folks are like, oh, well, hey, we're there for a few hours a week, or we're there every day, but we don't use all the building. Really, what you want to think about is big picture. Does all the building get used? Does most of the building get used and you have some area that's just storage? It's really looking at, in most cases, houses of worship, almost all cases, it's going to be 100%, unless you have an area that you're like, hey, this is, shut down and we only use it during the summertime for summer camp or something like that. But almost all cases, it's going to be 100%. You can optionally, you can add a photo if you need to. Joanne had mentioned something a minute ago about an ID number. One of the things that's a growing trend, and it goes back to Ken's statement about benchmarking and use of portfolio manager. Portfolio manager is becoming a common tool that if a municipality says, hey, if you're building, and we just are going through this in Central Ohio, your building's over 50,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet, you are required to disclose energy data. And so there may be an ID number or some way that your building is actually ID'd. If not, it will be automatically assigned one. So in this case, we're not going to assume we have an ID, and then we're going to want to make sure if any of these things apply. Do we have parking areas? So if you have parking areas, probably doesn't make a difference. And I can tell you from experience, if you have a parking lot that doesn't have any light fixtures on it, parking poles, doesn't impact your energy. We'll take Ed's example, our 1,800 square foot building. If we have 50,000 square feet of
It's
parking space.
18,000.
Oh, 18,000, I apologize.
That's good. Yeah.
I figured they built the sanctuary space and then they expanded out.
No,
So-
okay.
So if you have really large parking space that has a lot of parking lights, then you'd want to make sure that that's included. Does it have full-time K-12 school? We're going to assume at this point it doesn't, but if it did, there'd be some other steps we need to do. Does it include a social or meeting banquet room? Well, let's say it does. Does it have some class spaces for part-time? And does it have a daycare? No, let's say that it does.
So for ours, since we're starting with the old wing, which is sanctuary, social hall, offices and stuff like that, and then we built the education wing 5 years later, I just go through this one as the original building, and then we're going to add and put an addition on in 5 years, right?
Yep. So then that's where you can go in. So once you set up the building, then you're going into adding the building uses, and you'll notice that when we clicked a couple of those check marks, this is giving us a warning that, hey, remember, a worship facility also includes these spaces. So what it's telling you is, I don't have to go up here and add another type of space. I can just simply define that with the house of worship space. But it's telling me because I said something about parking, it wants to now know how big's my parking lot.
Oh boy.
Well, we'll just say that it's kind of small. So parking garage on it, again, if it's got a garage on it, might have ventilation fans, it might have lights. So we're gonna assume that's no. And that it's not enclosed and that there's no heating to it. But again, if you didn't know one of those, you could always check this as a temporary value. Now, we've got Zach's House of Worship is listed here in Columbus, Ohio. It's got a property ID to it. doesn't have any metrics. And we got details though. We got details about the building. Now, my colleague Molly warned me the other day when we were doing this preparation for this. She said, this is the most important part. You can do a lot of stuff in Portfolio Manager and you can go back and edit a lot of stuff. And really, the key thing is don't be afraid of it, because you can go in and make those edits, corrections, adjustments. Just don't hit the delete the property button. And if you do that, it makes you confirm that you're doing that. But that's really the only thing that you can screw up in Portfolio Manager is if you really delete the property, they really think you mean delete the property. So this is a part of the profile that may be helpful as you're thinking about, one of the common things with houses of worship is, you have turnover on the board, the property committee, and those types of things. So you can keep some of your notes here. But you'll notice we have our building uses here, but we don't have any energy data. Now we have to add a meter. So we can go in and say, well, we got an electric meter and we got a gas meter. And let's get started. Oh, I forgot one part. So this is where you add your, hey, we have some on-site wind turbines and we have some on-site solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also still purchasing from the grid.
Yeah.
So now and I forgot that double check is, we should be able to look through here and go, hey, do we have 4 meters? Well, we got the 2 utilities, then we have our 2 renewable energy ones, but that should match up so that when we go to get started, now we have 4 meters. So now this is something that's kind of gets into a little bit into the weeds, but when we start, and we put this reference on the worksheet, when you're starting to add data in, one of the things that it needs to know is, when did the meter become active? One of the easiest things to do is just simply put the reference point of that it started. Now see, it's going to tell us, hey, we don't have any data here. So usually we measure gas and CCF. The easiest thing to do is put in the date that it first went into effect. And you're not going to mark it inactive. This would be if, hey, they came and swapped out the meter and you continued to use that same building with new data. The real point is, once the meter has become active, it's going to start looking for, any type of data. So the one other nice thing about Portfolio Manager is it's pretty obnoxious with telling you, hey, there's something that's not quite right here. Here's how to fix it. So the other thing is you're probably not going to have data from 1973 to 2023. So you could even put in there that the meter became active, just a short time ago, whenever, as long as you have some meter data since then, it'll start calculating.
On something like this is okay. Is there any rule of thumb, you started 5 years ago or something like that? Because let's say you did nothing. The building was built in 2000. You did really nothing with it up until 2015, when you started to do what you thought about improvements. And so if you took the last 5 years of data, say it started in 2015, and you got 5 years of baseline data, and then you said, now I'm starting to screw in LED light bulbs and put solar panels on and stuff like that. So is it really just to create a baseline there that you're going back?
Yeah, so this active point is really just a reference point again, so that if you have multiple years of data, but some of that information is coming from different meters, because as you can see, there are meter ID. You can get very granular in this, and what we're gonna do here is just get something set up. You
Yeah.
can get in and really customize this, like if you have multiple meters on a site, like you could say, this is the electric for the rectory, or this is the electric for the classroom wing. And
Right.
so what it's gonna wanna do is just making sure that it's matching up the dates and the meter types with the use
Okay.
and the space types.
So if you say your meter started at 2000, but you really don't have any data before 2018, that's not going to mess it up, right?
Correct. That the congregation that we just looked at, where the building was built in 1958,
Mhm.
you know, they have data for the last several years, but they don't have data, 60 years ago,
Right.
and that's okay.
Okay.
Yep. So again, it's going to ask for some updated information, like how is this measured? So electric, we're going to say kilowatt hours. Just use Ed's example here, 2015. We don't have any special details. For solar, it's giving us kilowatt hours. Just say that one online and oh, 2.
Mhm.
And let's just say here. Okay. And now we've created the meters, and again, it will reward you with a nice big green means go, red means stop, acknowledgement. So now you've got meters here, but you don't have any data, right?
Mhm.
So we can see we got our 4 meters. Proceed for a second. So now you have these meters, but before you go dumping data in there, one of the things that gets lost because you get excited, you get all the data in there and you're like, great, now I can see a number. Now I can see some baselines. I can do some stuff with the tool, but the meters don't mean anything unless you tell the tool, hey, these meters go to a building. So the one thing that it wants to know is, hey, do all these meters here, if I look at my building called Zach's HOW, do all 4 of these meters account for all of the energy use? Or am I missing something, right? Because they're trying to score your impact, and the only way they know what your impact is if they know that they've got all the meters and all the data. So we're going to say, yes, they do. And now, so now it's starting to look a little bit more like our St. Albans church, except for, again, we don't have any reference points because we don't have the energy data in there. But now we have meters, so this page looks a little different. And because we said we're in Columbus, we're here. Now, this is where, again, you can get into a little bit more of the nuance where it'll tell you, where is this grid at? And then let's see. Now, we go here, we want to start entering some data, right? Well, we can go in and go, hey, I have a start date. And it's going to give you an assumption that you had some days go by, but you can go in and edit this. Well, maybe it was the 2nd and you use 12,000 kilowatt hours and cost you $5,000. So that's one way you can do this, right? One at a time, over and over and over again.
What's the green power tick box there for?
Oh, so in this particular case, it's going to, because this is coming, oh, I'm sorry. Good question, Ed. So it's going to, starting at the top, this is the electric meter.
Right.
And if you had some special way that you wanted to, again, name it, if not, it's going to give you an ID number and a default name.
Mhm.
So at the top, it's starting with the electric grid. So because this is the power purchased from the electric grid,
Right.
if let's say you're in a aggregation program where you're getting 100% renewable energy, or you're in a power supply contract, you can always check that and say, here's how much of my power is.
Okay,
Hey, I don't know where it was generated, or hey, I do, and here's what the facility ID is.
okay.
We'll just assume at this point that I don't, but I do know it's somewhere here in Ohio. And it's coming from wind. And some of the supply contracts get into the details to share that with you so that you'll actually know. So this is where we start to have, it's starting to look and match things up, right? Is it saying, hey, my electric meter was created in 2015, but you're telling me my first piece of data is 2023. You have a gap here. Again, that's okay. You have a gap. But it does tell us, hey, we successfully updated that, but hey, there's caution.
There's always good news.
Yeah. So again, you could go through and rinse and repeat with this, with each one of these meters, and enter this one at a time. However, my friend Zach has prepared for us a little sheet that we're going to upload because grab this.
And you're saying that if your utility is part of the program, part of the is amenable, they might be able to upload all your data right into the historical data, or do they only update it as the bills come through?
So it depends. So there are companies like ours that are uh, service providers that can be a conduit to help get that automatically to happen. And some utilities, and I'm going to go back here for just a second, you'll notice this thing called that says green button.
Mm-hmm.
That's a format that is common to utilities for their energy data, so that you could actually get data from them and then upload it in. And that actually, that's what I was just getting ready to show you is here,
Oh.
there's a single meter spreadsheet that if I
Mhm.
said, hey, it's the electric grid, I want to use a single spreadsheet, I can click on that and you'll notice up here at the top, it's in my downloads, is I have a file now that's coming down to me. And this is one way that you can get the data from your utility account. Well, hey, look at that. It's already populated. Start date, end date, usage. And this is where we get into, costs. Is it estimated or not? Do you have a demand? The thing that I want to point out about when you get this sheet out, you'll notice that when you click on these headers, it gives you some very specific information. Listen to it. That's probably one of the top frustrations if you're going to do a mass update of data. You've gone in and formatted the date wrong, or you've copied and pasted, and so you've overrode one of their formats. So it's really important to do a paste values, or, some people are a whiz at entering data in a spreadsheet and would rather do that rather than enter it directly into a tool. And I think one of the things that I want to do here for just a second is stop and share the screen. There we go. So you can see my whole screen. So when I get my spreadsheet out, it looks kind of like this. It's got the headers and it's got these cues up above it. But I'm going to make this one go away for a second. And
the cost you have in there, is that the entire cost, including any demand, and that's distribution charges and energy charges and whatever else they can throw on?
so that's a really good question, Ed, because that's where getting into the tool, you have to understand what data is going in. So we have seen a lot of the utilities, when they're just giving you the data, they're giving you when it's read, start and
Right.
end time, giving you usage. The cost data is typically whatever the distribution utility, in your case, DTE, in Ohio, AEP, First Energy, Duke, AES. They're giving you what are those transportation distribution costs. And if you're on a third-party retail supply contract, that cost isn't included.
Yeah.
Now, again, you can add that in the tool separately, or you can add that additional cost in when you're going in and let's say you're updating on a periodic basis, quarterly or even monthly, but you're updating it through a spreadsheet, you may be adding those additional costs in here. So just to show you, we populated one. So this is what it might look like. Again, making sure that at minimum, the required data fields are populated. So if I go back here, all I have to do then, instead of going across and entering every single one of these, I can go in here. Go.
Well, everybody got a sandbox.
Yeah, we like to play around. We tend to have fun from time to time. So this electric upload says it's ready. I'm going to populate it. Voila. So instead of having to go through and enter every single one of those data points, now again, I still have to enter the data in there in the spreadsheet, or like I said, you can get data out from your utilities in what they call green button format that would allow you to be able to upload it. So now if I said save, now it's going to tell me, hey, wait a minute. I have an issue here, right? So, hey, it's still telling me my meter started on 2015, but I don't have data till 21. And then it's saying, hey, wait a minute, you have data through October of last year, and then you started again here in January. Again, it will still allow you to do that, but it's advising you that you have some gaps in the data.
Justin, a higher level question. When we built our facility, the main building, which went into service in 1998, was basically a sanctuary, social hall, some chapels, and the office area. Boom. Okay. So I set that up as my original building. 5 years later, we put on an education wing. It's all classrooms. Would it get better? But it's run on different heating systems and everything, but it's all DTE coming in. So there's no split I have between what's the old building and new building. But when I set up the new building, would it be preferable to, instead of setting that up as a house of worship, almost set it up as a classroom wing? Because that's what it is.
So it's the same, it's two separate buildings.
No, it's the same building. They're connected.
Same building.
Same
Okay.
building. They're connected. Okay. We built the basic worship area, offices, everything one hunk. That's 1,800 square feet, most of which is sanctuary area and social hall and stuff like that. And then there's some offices. And then the other area is almost all classrooms.
Okay. So that's a really good question. I'm gonna find so here where we talk about what a worship facility is.
Right,
Okay, so it does include classrooms.
right.
And one of the things, and I'll point out in our worksheet
Mm-hmm.
we shared with everybody.
Got it right here.
Yep. There is, I want to say it's 25%. Let's see, space. Yeah, so I guess we didn't have the specific percentage, and I'll follow up and get you the percentage, but I believe it's 25. It might be. Yeah, I believe if it's greater than 25, it might be if it's yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 25%. If it's greater than 25% of the total building area, that you should use a second space type.
Okay.
So in that particular case, then you could go in here and say,
Mhm.
hey, we have 18,000 square feet. And then, hey, I want to add
Yep.
another space type,
Mm-hmm.
education.
Yeah.
Preschool area, and you can add that in, and then you're just adding in the.
Another 18 square feet. Yeah. Okay. Good.
That would then rate it differently than a house of worship, right? It would rate it as a school or something? Or
Yeah,
no?
so the entire facility is going to be, let's just put a couple of numbers in here.
Plus, since there's a
So
preschool in there, we could have, and they're there every, well, 5 days a week and everything like that. Whereas the church's side is basically used on Sunday, and then the offices are 1 or 2 days a week. So,
mhm.
be
Yeah,
nice
and
to
see
get rid-
this. Yeah, and see, this is where if the space type is greater than 50%,
Mhm.
that's how you're determining like what's the overarching building type. So like right here,
Yeah.
like if you would have done this addition onto your building
Mhm.
and it was 30,000 square feet and it was school and you still had the worship,
Yep.
then that's where you would go in here and you would change the type. You can see here when we added that additional square footage, it gave
Mhm.
us a little, hey, something's not right here.
Okay.
And there's our link if we want to go and see, hey, how is this square footage calculating our EUI? But you'll notice this also correlates here. Hey, it's 18. Hey, wait a minute. We're not quite evened out here. So then we need to go in and make an adjustment. So now we're really at 23,000 square feet. An update property. Now should be matching in our details. Yep, there we go. So now it knows big property, we're 23,000 feet, and we've got the daycare added in.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
So at this point now, because we uploaded our data, again, we still have some gaps in there, but we can see that we've begun to update our data in with that Excel file. I do want to take just a minute because we're down to about the last 10 minutes or so, and been great at asking some questions and getting us into some of the nuances here. I want to find out from our audience here, what questions might you have that we haven't answered yet? And are there things that you would like to maybe go over on the worksheet? Make sure we use the last couple minutes effectively here. Go ahead, Joanne.
Okay. All right. So Rockdale Temple was torn down, I think, around the year 2000, and the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, bought the property and rebuilt everything except the chapel, the original chapel from Rockdale. The chapel is a spectacular marble walled, most unenergy efficient building you could imagine. In fact, it's so bad that the pipes for the organ are in there, and in the summer they have to heat it at night because you can't have the temperature going down below a certain degree. Anyways, so the Rockdale now, which is about 5,000 square feet now, instead of, I don't know, it was huge before, leases their facility from the JCC. And the JCC supplies the boiler, and then they have pipes and so on and so forth. And I understand we have a meter. We had an energy audit. I sent a copy of it to Molly, done in 2015. And since then, we've added all new light fixtures and light sensors and in the bathrooms. Almost the whole building has got new LEDs. There are a couple things that have to be replaced. One is the fan. I mentioned that the boiler sends energy from the JCC. I understand we have our own separate meter that the JCC uses in order to charge Rockdale for how to bill them for their energy use. I have not seen that meter. Some people have told me about it. I don't know how. So the JCC obviously is not a house of worship. On Sundays, the Sunday school classrooms are held in the JCC. And on big occasions, we get to use the large auditorium at the JCC. What would be nice is to put something together, but I have a feeling it's so complex and so convoluted.
Okay.
that I'd have no idea how to do this. And I'm talking with the director today, and she has no, she's like, well, we can fill in some of the stuff, from the thing, but the worksheet. And maybe, we should talk about this separately because it's so unique. I do know that Addith built a separate school building, which you're talking about 50%. I don't know that it's quite 50% larger, but it's quite large.
Okay.
So there are some exceptions to this general, nice, neat format.
Sure. And I think that you said it was Rockdale, right? So I think that, may be a situation where we just need to look at, let's see. When we look at the type of facility.
Oh.
Because it could be classified public assembly. So there are a lot of like social meeting hall that And we could maybe talk about this offline, Joanne, getting you an account set up, to get the structure set up where then all you have to do is enter the data. Because some of that would come down to like, I heard you say about 5,000 square feet. And then there's, the larger facility, because some of that may come down
Yeah,
to just
it includes
defining
social,
that range.
there's a social meeting hall. There are 5, maybe 6 offices. There is a full kitchen, and a chapel, and a library. So that this is all within Rockdale, but then, and there are some classrooms.
Seems like to me the key is going to be how well the metering matches up with the actual use of the building. Because if there's a lot of slop, in one meter gets used for 2 different ways, it does get to be hard. But if you can reasonably assign one meter to Rockdale and the other meter to the JCC, then it makes it cleaner to do it, unless you want to do some sort of apportionment. But that would be.
I think the JCC has its own meter, and we have a meter so that we're charged just for the electric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I was trying to duplicate it here, and I think I have to go back.
I almost wonder if we have to do this as the JCC building.
So it could be, so depending on, because of having multiple meters, that is where it gets a little complicated. This, I think it's.
I would think that Adath Israel has multiple meters too, because they built the second building later.
Yeah.
Big building.
But some of it gets down to like that may be the case where it could be if you're metering. There was that one checkbox that I had when we were setting it up that said, is this covering all of the usage? So it might be setting up the meters to take care of Rockdale, and then setting up another space that would be the meeting hall and the classrooms. And so it also could be better to set it up as a campus where you're setting up the individual buildings that way. Let's talk about that offline, and we'll work through and help you get that structured, because it sounds like that's probably 80% of your work, right? Getting it structured, and then it's a matter of just maintaining the data and keeping it updated.
Okay.
But happy to help you do that.
Thank you.
What sort of homework should we be doing before next week?
So I guess one question before that is anyone have questions about things that we did now that you'd like to see for next week?
Can you send the links, document, because you at the very top of the page, so you started out with the EPA, and I tried to write them all down. The different links that you used, and then show what you click on to get to the next page, because
Sure.
I was trying to follow all of that.
All the ones up here that are open?
Yeah, like you've got building, right, all these different links, but we have to click on something to take us to where we want to go. And so if you can do like a screenshots or something and make an arrow, I think that would be very helpful, because it's a lot for me to remember.
Sure. What I was planning on doing afterwards is we'll send out a link to the session here, and then I was going to share this, which is going to have the links in here, and we'll go ahead and annotate each one of the links so that you have reference to that.
Yeah, because you know you're taking around and clicking on things very quickly, and I don't know all the time what you were clicking on to get to the next page.
Okay. Sure.
That's because it's top secret.
That,
Okay.
that is one of the things about Energy Star, and actually preparing for this. I know Ken and I had a conversation that, you know, sometimes it's, and he mentioned about using it, and I used it in my very early building engineering days, like 2002, 2003, and there was a big update in 2008, and it just totally looked like, I mean, it looked like you went from a bicycle to a Cadillac. I mean, it was just massively different graphical interface, et cetera. And it's grown into what it is now. But it's certainly, there's a lot of stuff there. And that was one of the reasons why we put together the worksheet, to have some of those tips and links, tips and hints, like, hey, you can go to the auditor's site, but, you know, for example, nonprofits and specifically houses of worship, if you aren't paying taxes, the county really doesn't care about keeping your records up to date. And so you may not have accurate data. And so, you know, that comes down to you to be able to refine and figure out where you can get that information from. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to put that together with some helpful hints. Anything else that anybody wants to get out of next week, the kind of using Portfolio Manager? And then I'll answer Ken's question about homework.
Are you going to guide us through the loading of the data next week, or are you going to assume that we're going to do that on our own, or what's your plan?
Yeah, so between now and then, if you have difficulty getting data in, whether through the spreadsheet or in manual progression, certainly reach out to myself or Molly, and you know, we'll get you some support on that. And then next week, that's where we'll pick up. Is we'll assume everybody's got an account with data in it, and then we'll start poking around. There's some different things you can do relative to your data. We go back here for a second because we're about to wind down here. Now I'm going to go back to our group here. So we'll assume next week that you have some data in, and you know, there's some kind of pre-populated dashboard metrics that show up. We'll get into manipulating those a little bit and trying to work through some comparisons. We didn't touch on it because it's really, once you get all the data in there, there's some pre-populatable reports you can generate. There are some things you can do to say, hey, I want to start making some adjustments. I do an energy audit and I'm going to head towards some future goal. How do I forecast, you know, hey, if I'm going to target getting to an Energy Star score of 75 and I'm at a 51 right now, you know, what does that mean? You know, we can go into those types of exercises. And then there's also a whole nother tab up here in your account called reporting that gets into a carousel of all kinds of reports. It just, you know, it's not necessarily intuitive and it takes a little time to sort through. But if you have data in there, then we can work through some of that kind of what ifs and how to's.
Ken, two quick questions. One, what is considered a good Energy Star rating? I know 100. Okay, but in real life.
So I'll tell you the guidance that I give folks is, and this is kind of paraphrasing from industry professionals as well, is basically if you're at a 25 or less, you're probably not increasing your score without significant capital investment.
Right.
You're gonna have to replace a boiler, replace a chiller, big air handling equipment, your lighting in the whole building. If you're between 25 and 50, you're probably still gonna have to have some capital improvements. But some of those meaningful things like replace the weather stripping, making sure you put occupancy sensors. We've seen, laminated signs that remind people to turn out the lights. It's the common sense, not always commonly applied, right? But once you get between 50 and 75, you're really looking at, hey, I've made some improvements to my building. It doesn't necessarily maybe have the newest equipment, but really tweaking and tuning. People take their car in for a tune-up when it starts squeaking and squealing, but people don't take buildings in for a tune-up. Really, that 50 to 75, you can make some pretty good progressions with just continuous commissioning, regular maintenance, doing all the simple things like putting some wall sensors in your restrooms or transient areas. I will point out the First Presbyterian Athens is the perfect case study for that, where about 10, 12 years ago, they replaced their boiler and they went from like a 33 to like a mid to upper 60s. And then it took them 4 or 5 more years of replacing lights as they burned out with LEDs, putting in programmable thermostats, those little things, to a point where it took them 5 years to get the Energy Star score above 75. So that is a really good question, Ed, but it's basically a progression of, hey, some capital improvements if you're really low, and then some combination of capital improvements and the behavioral and basic things.
Okay.
Because really what you're being scored against is the 8% of the other houses of worship. So you're
Right.
better than 75% at that point.
And is there any quick way that of to find out, you had the little green button there. How do I find out if DTE's green button compatible, or however you would like to put it, or if they've never heard of a green button?
Well, I tell you what, I don't have it right at my fingertip, but if I can't find it in a few minutes, I know exactly who to ask, and we'll get I'm going to actually make sure that we have information about the environmental impact of the different utilities, a reference to that. I will get a reference on green button compatibility. And then I'll also make sure that I get a clarification on what's the tipping point between when you should add another space type versus folding it into the building. Those are 3 takeaways. Those are 3 things that are my homework for our follow-up.
Well, that'd be good, because it looks like right now just need to do a whole lot of work loading this all and setting it up, and just want to get the best setup, since the education wing structurally and use is very different than let's say the worship wing. Okay.
Yeah, that may be something that, over the next, couple days, Ed, if you have specific questions, feel free to email those, and we'll do our best to get you an answer so you can get it built.
Was your email anywhere on here, or?
And I'll make sure that when I circulate this back, I think we're going to circulate things back through you, Ken.
I don't know that it's necessary. You can copy me, but I don't know that you need to go through me.
Okay.
I think that's
Well,
just
then
another step.
Yeah,
Can we share the recording with some other people?
Yeah, so what I intend to do is everybody that was in attendance, we'll send out follow-ups to these couple of questions here in the next 24 hours, and then we'll link to the recording in as well. And then you can share it with others as appropriate.
Yeah, there's some people that want to come that couldn't make today, but
Yes.
if it'll come next week. So
So
I
we
think
have
they'll
options.
benefit from seeing the recording.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay,
All right.
super.
Yeah.
This was wonderful.
Thank you very
Little
much,
over,
Justin. And
over our time, but the one thing I do appreciate everybody's input and interaction. So one thing I will simply say is I will volunteer for the 5 of you that attended, that in some way, shape, or form we'll either do a level 1 or some sort of phone consult to help you work through getting your portfolio manager set up. And you know, if it makes sense for us to come on site and do a brief walkthrough and put together a quick report for you or help you set up benchmarking, I'll let you choose which one that should be.
Yeah, thank you. Because Sunday I go to a congregational meeting to have them approved to put 108,000 kilowatts of solar panels on our roof.
Wow.
God bless you. It sounds like a
Nice.
challenge.
What city are you in? What?
Yes,
city?
Ann Arbor.
you might be far enough down the road that we just need to do a phone consult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you located? Because
Ann
we're,
Arbor,
oh,
Ann
okay.
Arbor, Michigan. Yeah.
We have in Hamilton County, we figured out that we have 7 churches. They're all churches with solar panels, which was more than I thought we had.
Well,
But
we've got quite a few in Ann Arbor.
not a whole lot when you think about how many houses of worship are in just in one county, and we are regional for 10 counties.
Well, we have one actually structure in town. It's called Genesis, and it's shared by St. Clair's Episcopal Church and Temple Beth Emeth. And they've got a whole solar array. They got about 100,000 on their roof, and they actually have it all set up so that they can just turn around the front, the chancel area. So when St. Clair's uses it on Sunday, they have it one way, and then they just turn around the wall. And when Temple Beth Emeth uses it for services on Sabbath, they have the other wall. So it really works out nicely.
That's very cool.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Justin. Ken,
Yes, Jeff.
for organizing it.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Ken.
Appreciate everybody's attendance, participation.
Yep. Have a good week, and we will see you